administrative experience at the state, national, and the international levels. At present, he is the Vice Chairman of the Rajasthan Economic Transformation Advisory Council and also the Economic Advisor to the Chief Minister of Rajasthan. He is the Chair of CUTS Institute for Regulation and Competition. He also chairs the Board of Access Development Services. Today, ladies and gentlemen, he's going to speak on investing in Rajasthan, but I'm sure he would be very willing to answer many other questions outside that topic that may come to your mind. So please keep your questions ready. And please join me in welcoming the former Finance Secretary of India, Dr. Arvind Mayaram. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. President and friends, as Ajay has already mentioned, we go back a long way. I was just starting off in Rajasthan, the Bureau of Investment Promotion way back in 1992. And Ajay used to head the northern region, I think, if I'm not mistaken, of CII at that point of time. And so we did a lot of things together. Idea was to promote investment. So it's in a manner of speaking, returning to the roots, because we did a lot of investment promotion then. And what I'm going to speak to you today also is on investment promotion in the state of Rajasthan. But I'll deal with it a little differently, because that point of time, I was mandated to attract investment. Today, I would like to speak to you from a little distance from the actual what is happening, for the reason that I can also see where the problems lie, and I think it's only fair that I speak with you on. So I'm going to speak with you at three levels. First, of course, I'd like to speak with you about what Rajasthan has been for a very long period of time and how it has transformed itself. Why in some areas it is ahead of the curve as far as creating an investment climate is concerned. The second, I would like to speak about the areas where we believe we need to do a lot more work. And the third, I would also like to speak about where I think the Indian industry as a group of, as a participant, a component of Indian economy, have actually not given the same kind of results that was expected after the opening up of the Indian economy in 1991. And so there would be something that perhaps you and your members could take back and ponder upon as to why we have not been able to come up to the expectations. Rajasthan is unique in the sense that it has all the element or ingredients of a very heady cocktail, I would say, because to start with, and one of the things that we always used to look at is what is the starting point for any investor who has never looked at any place in India from a foreign investor perspective? Is visibility. How visible are you? So, which is true also in some ways for Indian investors, because at the end of the day, a little bit of familiarity always makes it more comfortable to go to a new place. And in Rajasthan's case, I think our biggest USP has been its familiarity on account of its culture, very rich culture, on account of its potential for tourism, how people have been traveling there. And even though I have had at some point of time, at one point I went and met Adi Godrej in Mumbai to say, why don't you come and invest in Rajasthan? And he looked at me very quaintly and said, why do you want people like me to invest in Rajasthan? I would rather go and enjoy myself in that state. So, so there has always been this kind of a dichotomy in the manner in which people have looked at Rajasthan, that don't spoil it with industry. Why don't you leave it pristine so that people can go and enjoy the place? So that has also been one of the things that people have said. But whether they look at it in the manner in a positive way or in a way where they would wish it was rather pristine, there is familiarity. So it is known. The place is known, it's not an unknown entity. And then it also is uniquely placed, which I have seen, and I think increasingly now it is becoming more and more evident. For instance, if you look at the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, which is also parallel to the dedicated freight corridor for the railways. It runs longest in the state of Rajasthan. So actually, Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor is not should not be looked only upon as an area where a lot of industrial activity can take place. It is basically connecting the two largest markets in India. The Western market, which is defined by Mumbai and Ahmedabad, and Delhi, which is the northern market. And this connects. And right in the middle of it, you have Rajasthan, which then is equidistant, if I may use that term, from both the markets. And therefore, strategically, if you look at it on a map, you would find Rajasthan to be placed in a way, where in a manner that you would find it easy to operate in both the markets if you were situated in Rajasthan. But it is not just the issue of being located geographically somewhere, because the first question that arises always is in terms of infrastructure. This is something that we struggled with in 1990s when we went out, created a very friendly environment. We had a very interesting investment policy. Everything was in order, but the problem was infrastructure was very poor. And therefore in 90s, most of the industrial houses, when I would go and meet them, would say to me, Rajasthan, we really like Rajasthan very much, but then if we were to put our industry in that state, we find that the infrastructure is not really up to the mark, and therefore it increases our cost of transaction. But from that time in the 90s till today, there has been a complete sea change. Not only in terms of the national highways, with the numbers have increased, it's almost grown by 50% of what it was earlier. There are that many more national highways, 4-lane highways, toll roads. And so Rajasthan has a fairly well spread out road network. And the railways also is now completely broad gauged. In the 90s, if you recall, very large parts of Rajasthan were connected with the meter gauge, and there was a transshipment issue that if you needed to bring coal or you needed to bring raw material from outside, there was transshipment involved from broad gauge to meter gauge, but that also doesn't exist anymore. So the infrastructure is fairly well developed. Our power situation is very good. We are now producing more power than what we use. And one interesting thing is that on climate mitigation also, because a lot of industries are now looking at green finance because it's cheaper and more readily available for industries that meet the standards, ESG standards. We find Rajasthan has done a lot in the field of climate mitigation, and there is a Rajasthan action plan on climate change, and a lot of green financing requirements as far as the state's action is concerned are already in place and are moving well. For instance, greenhouse gas inventorying has been done in Rajasthan, which of course also identifies those industries which are in this, which fall into this, and then to help them, to provide incentives for them to move towards more green technologies. So in that sense, Rajasthan has come a long way. It is now amongst the frontline states in terms of policies, in terms of incentives. For instance, I had mentioned perhaps earlier, but not in PAFI, but in many other fora, first time in the country, first time. I mean, it's never happened before. And no other state has gone this far, because there are several states who have emulated the example of Rajasthan but haven't got this far. Is the Rajasthan MSME Facilitation Act of 2019. Under this act, government in one stroke brought in an omnibus law which said for any of the MSME industries, no prior approval or NOC or any kind of permit is required from Government of India, from the state government under any of the state laws to start your industries. Close to 10,000 registrations have taken place under this act, where they simply have to go to the portal, they have to register, and in real time, automatically they receive a registration certificate from through the portal itself, which they can print out, put it up in there, and then they can use it for getting electricity connection, for getting from bank loans. It says that this shall be deemed as the approval of the state government under every in Rajasthan Act. Now, many states have tried to emulate it, but they have said this will be given within 5 days, within 3 days, etc. Here we have said you don't have to go to any state government office. And I think this is something which I believe is revolutionary, because the interface with the government officials has been completely eradicated. No inspector can come to your unit for 3 years from the date of your registration. So you get enough time and space not to have to run to offices to get your approvals, etc., but for concentrating in establishing your unit. My calculation is that even if 20% of those who have registered succeed, their success rate being 20%, which would be close to 2,000 units, it is a very good result as far as setting up, because many of the people would try their luck. Perhaps the market will not accept it. Perhaps there'll be failures, but that's all right. I mean, we accept that should happen. But at least you're free of government controls. You're free of any government interaction. The Chief Minister of Rajasthan had written 2 letters to the Prime Minister saying, please give the same kind of dispensation under central laws, so that in one fell swoop, you would have no approvals required for MSMEs to start. And you can imagine the kind of energy it can unleash in the economy. Unfortunately, that has not happened. And we are still seeing this whole idea of ease of doing business, where instead of 30 days, if 20 days you take in providing a permit, you get certain marks, etc. To my mind, it really doesn't help. If either you have to go to the office or you don't have to go to an office. And that is where it stands. Now, if you look at also the incentive schemes, Rajasthan has announced a Rajasthan Investment Promotion Scheme, which is known as RIPS, in 2019, which covers almost every economic activity which you can think of, from food processing to robotics and artificial intelligence. It covers everything, and you have a very, very strong, attractive incentive package available for industries across the entire spectrum. This is available to existing units who want to go for expansion, or it is also available to the new units, which is greenfield. They want to come into new sector, new area. The benefits are available. It's available to manufacturing, but also available to services. Earlier, if you remember, most of the incentive schemes are only for manufacturing. But this time, these services have also been included, and anybody who starts a service will also get these benefits. Incidentally, let me tell you this, that for MSMEs under the Facilitation Act, if you employ less than 10 people in a knowledge industry, for instance, a call center or a software place, you can start it in a residential building. You remember we used to hear all the time that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, etc., started their business in their garages. But if you look at the Indian urban laws, you cannot do any commercial activity from residential premises. But under the Rajasthan Act, we have allowed these to be undertaken from your residence, so that you can start small. And even for electricity, You do not have to convert it into commercial connection. You can continue with your residential connection for a period of 3 years, till such time you will discover whether you will survive in the market or you will not, and then you will move to a commercial area. So this is also available for services. There is a special dispensation for employment generation. And that if you have an industry which generates employment, and there are specifications given how it can be done, I mean, what kind of industries will these be, then there is a special dispensation of incentives. There is also, for instance, investment subsidy of state tax, which is either due or deposited for 7 years, exemption from electricity duty, from land tax, mandi tax, stamp duty, interest subsidy, and capital subsidy. So all these are part of this new RIPS that has been set up, that has been provided to the industry persons. I think we have, how much time I've taken already? 20 minutes, I think I've taken. So I'll just take 2, 3, 4 minutes, and then I'll stop, and then we can have question and answers. One of the things, if you look at the 1991 as a watershed, something which I promised I will do, is to tell you where the industry has failed us and where industry must now begin to have an introspection on. If you look at from 1991, whether you look at incremental output ratio of the investment that has been made in manufacturing, or you look at productivity, including labor productivity, there haven't been much gains. China and India started in 1991 around the same level. In fact, in terms of labor productivity, they were lower than us. But China has improved its labor productivity 26 times from what it was in 1991. India has only improved it by 4 times. Obviously, there is something wrong, that something not right that we are doing in manufacturing sector for keeping our labor productivity so low. And similarly, it is also in terms of ICOR, our incremental output ratio, which means that a capital that we are using, per unit of capital we're using for output, is much higher than it is in a country like China or in any other of the advanced economies. So obviously, the industrialist or the manufacturing, the businessmen in manufacturing sector are not using their capital well. And this is something which has an impact, overall impact on economic growth in the country. And I think it is time that you begin to look at it also to change this. I'm talking about the for all India level, but the same is true for Rajasthan too. And I would certainly want to see that there is some movement on this going forward. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Mayaram. As always, your helicopter broad brush view gave a different perspective. One thinks of Rajasthan, one thinks of the rich and attractive culture, the tourism part, the heritage, the food. But I think the perspective on industry was quite, I was not aware, for example, on the RIPS, which you mentioned on 2019, or the MSME Act, which you talked about. So we'll open it for questions. What I'm going to do is I have 2 questions already, but rather than my asking them, I'll ask Deepak. Deepak, unmute yourself and please ask your questions. And I'm also requesting other participants to please send their questions in. Deepak, over to you.
Thanks, Ajay. So, sir, thanks for this tour de force on this count. So one particular question that I had was this, that while MSME Facilitation Act is really a commendable step, are there also similar plans to extend such deemed approval sort of thing for the larger non-MSME units, of course, albeit in select dimensions? Obviously, you can't do it for all probably, but at least in certain select dimensions. Second thing, sir, related question of a slightly different nature was related more to power and renewables and these type of things that you mentioned in terms of climate change. So Rajasthan is a state which is endowed very well with both the solar as well as wind. And are there any specific things that the state government is offering there in terms of captive generation of renewables? So let me stop there, sir. Thank you.
So let me answer both the questions. The first question that you have raised is, and I am quite engaged with it at the moment, is about how to make it easier for larger industries to also get similar dispensation. Now, one thing that we have found is that of the total number of approvals, NOCs, etc., that are required by large industries, only close to 10% or so are under any state law. Because large industries are predominantly governed by the central laws, whether it is in terms of the Industrial Development Act or any of the other acts. So therefore, even though we must, to even that 10%, we must move in that direction. And I think, in my opinion, we should be able to, and we're looking at it, that except for the orange and red categories in pollution, under the Pollution Act, others should get automatic or third-party approval. So we're looking at it at the moment. One of the things that we are actually in the council we are engaged with is to see how we can change this regime so that the interface with the bureaucracy, with the government, is drastically reduced. But you need to put a lot of pressure on central government to really see the change, feel that change. The second question you raised about was, so there are two parts to your question actually. It was a very smartly phrased question, but let me break it into two. One is the government of Rajasthan doing a lot on wind power and solar power? The answer is yes. There's a lot which is happening even for setting up new, for instance, land is being provided. We have made a law has been changed to say that if you take agricultural land, you don't have to convert it if you are doing solar farming. It has been called solar farming. And therefore the agricultural land can be used. You can take it for 30-year lease. And then after 30 years, the land reverts to the landowner and remains an agricultural land. So that makes it completely easy for anybody to start this. You don't have to buy, so you don't have to get into a lot of problems. You can lease the land easily for 30 years. And because in Rajasthan, especially in the Western Rajasthan, where you have much of the solar lux there, you really don't have very productive land. So people are happy to give that land for solar production. So whether it is wind power or solar power, that is happening. When you say captive solar power, there is a catch there, because at the moment, and it's not just related to Rajasthan, and I really think that it is time, as there was a GST council, they need to put up, although the credibility of the central government, and I'm speaking as representative of the state government, so pardon my saying this bluntly, but the credibility of the central government at this point of time vis-a-vis the states is very low, especially after they refused to pay the GST compensation, which was part of the agreement. So I don't know how many states will be willing to come on board on this. But I think it is worth making an effort to get a similar kind of power ministers council, so that you can have, electricity is a sector where you need to have a national consensus on pricing, on tariffs, and so on, if we really want to change it. And I have very simple proposition on this, which I have been promoting since I was finance secretary, but even now. One is that change the electricity law so that the power regulators are mandated to notify new power rates every year in April. Today, they have to wait for the utilities to come to them to ask for a change, and utilities are under the state governments and they are not allowed to ask for any change. So power tariffs don't change. And therefore, the financial health of the utilities gets deteriorated. We have seen that regulatory assets now are already mounting beyond 2 lakh crores. So it is not sustainable. So first is that they need to notify, which means they have to do their own costing. They must have a a whole team which works through the year, getting all the costs in, and then declare the tariff. Number two, the subsidies must be given from the budget, which means that not more than 10% cross subsidization should be permitted. It should not be in the manner where the power tariff actually is declared at, say, 3 rupees, but the industry has to pay 8 rupees. It is not sustainable again. So there has to be a band beyond which it cannot be cross subsidized. Everything else should come from the state budget. And the third is that the regulators should not be appointed from the same state, because then they become ex-bureaucrats from the same state, and then they are under the obligation of the political masters, and they don't want to take unpleasant decisions. So I think if these three changes can be brought in Electricity Act, you will see the change. But till then, I have my doubts that captive power to substitute grid power will actually really be very viable for the utilities, and I don't think the state government would be in a position to allow it.
Thank you, Dr. Mayaram. There was a question on industry shouldering more and more costs for agriculture, but you've already answered on cross subsidization. I'm going to move to a very spirited question from Neeta Kapoor. She is the CEO of International Spirits and Wine Association of India. She's asking, sir, alcohol beverage revenue state share exceeds over 18% of the state's own revenue. Rajasthan witnessed a revenue deficit over 300 crores in the CY despite AED and surcharge on liquor. What is your view on the progressive taxation policy? I don't know if the question is clear.
Yeah, basically, if I have understood it clearly, what is being asked here is that there is a tipping point beyond which the flexibility, so elasticity of taxation also has a limit. So if you continue to increase taxes on liquor, people actually at some point will start buying less, and therefore it would then hurt the state's revenues also. If I've understood it correctly, then I would answer it this way, that I fully understand what is being said. But it's at this point of time, it's Hobson's choice for the state. This year, the GST shortfall is going to be close to 2.5 lakh crores for the states. And the central government is not going to give more than 70,000 crores as compensation. So the 1,30,000 crores, which is a gap, will have to be either filled by borrowing from the market or by some taxes or the other that they can put together in the state. GST was a very good tax till such time that it became captive to the central government. GST was a federal tax, but today it has become captive. So what is happening is that the central government decides that it wants to give you compensation, doesn't want to give you compensation, at what time they want to release the state share. They can hold it back for 1 month. The state will be starved for that. So it's a bit of a mess at this point of time. The other thing that we must remember also is that when states do not have the capacity to raise finances from many other sources, most of the taxes have been subsumed under GST. So liquor is one of them, and fuel is another, POL. Now the same question is being raised all the time, that why do states levy such a high VAT on fuel? The answer is that what Government of India has done is it has reduced excise duty, which goes into the divisible pool, which has to be shared with the state governments, and has increased the cesses and surcharges, which only go to the central government. So you can imagine from a level of 0.9% of the GDP, which used to be the cesses and surcharges that the central government levied, it has now reached close to 9% of the GDP, which means humongous amount of taxes are being mopped up by Government of India, which it does not want to share with the state governments, although morally and technically it should have been. So there is the state government, finances are completely strapped. So at this point of time, it would be very difficult for any state government to sit back and say, all right, we are reducing the taxes on liquor because we think it's excessive. Because one other problem is also the schizophrenic society we live in, because we believe we go out and tell people drinking is morally not the right thing to do, while we in the drawing rooms we enjoy scotch and soda. So this is true for governments also. So when this question you raised before any political masters that people will start buying less, they say very good, because drinking is a bad thing. So if this reduces the consumption, very good. I mean, they don't mean it, but this is what they would say. So at this point, I think it's a bit difficult to see any reductions.
So as Nita has said, law of diminishing returns. Ishtiaq, over to you. You have a bunch of questions. Please shoot. Unmute, yeah.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Mr. Mayaram. I mean, I'm going to take your conversation back to Mr. Godrej. I think we can enjoy Rajasthan also in terms of our investment now that we have multiple, businesses in which we have interest. Of course, agriculture and animal husbandry is one of them, where we have invested quite a bit there. I've got two questions, and one, pardon me for doing the straight talk. I think as an industry or as a citizen, you would imagine that it is even more frustrating for us to hear and see the fractured federal structure that we see after the GST implementation and every problem that you've talked about. My question directly to you is that, what do you think, if there's anything that the state governments can do? I mean, of course, we do realize that, divisible excise taxes have really diminished, cesses, all of these things we realize that, there's a large concentration of wealth and revenue at the central level. But is there anything that you really think that the state governments can do, which can probably improve the situation a little bit? The second question is, as Ajay has said, prior to this, I worked for Coca-Cola and before that with Cargill, both US companies. There's one very interesting model which the US has developed probably over the last 100 years, that the development has been very inclusive. And almost every state that you drive into, you'll find that at least half a dozen Fortune 500 companies are headquartered there, and they're at the remotest place of the US. Where Walmart is headquartered, or for that matter, Minneapolis, where Cargill was headquartered. Do you really think that at some point in time, progressive states like Rajasthan can start working on that, where maybe 10 years from now, we can say that, okay, 5 top Indian industries headquartered in Rajasthan?
I think it would happen. And why it would happen will be not because of what the state government does. It is going to happen for two reasons. One, almost every state would have a few cities which would have world-class infrastructure. Jaipur, for instance, has world-class infrastructure even today if you go there, which means connectivity, which means international flights, which means airports which are large enough to be able to take in large aircrafts, and of course social infrastructure, the living condition, housing, things like that. And the second is the price of real estate. So if the price of real estate in Mumbai is going to be as high as it is today, or in Chennai or in Bangalore, it is going to be as high as it is today. You saw, for instance, a huge amount of movement of IT industry from Bangalore to Hyderabad and to Pune, for instance, or to even Noida. So there is a lot of these movements which are happening, but to really shake up some of the large corporates to move, I think it would be more in terms of real estate, which is, see what pandemic has also shown, if you see all over the world, that now actually many of the large corporations have started saying, why don't we just allow people to work from home? So you save on office space, you save on office infrastructure, and so on. So this movement will happen. This will happen. But let me throw something tempting at you. So you give me a wish list saying that if you do these 5 things, I'm willing to move my headquarters to Jaipur, and let's sit down and chat about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a conversation worth having for sure. There's no doubt.
Thank you. So, Dr. Mayaram, I have a question which is a favorite PAFI question. We find that all the state governments, including the federal government, does roll out a red carpet for people who want to invest. But we find that some of the things which are missing is a red carpet for people who've already invested. So we raise this with various state governments, and I hope under your guidance, leadership, and vision of if you can start an Invested in Rajasthan Bureau, which will not only help companies who have already invested in Rajasthan, who face issues on pleasure of doing business or ease of doing business. So can we expect that kind of organization? If there is one, we'd like to know. If there isn't one, can we help you build that organization called Invested in Rajasthan?
No, I think it's a good question, good suggestion. But I don't think there is an issue with that, because BIP was designed to do both. In fact, we always are, the motto we started with was that our best ambassadors are those who are invested in Rajasthan. I mean, if I went out and talked to somebody in Mumbai and said, come to Rajasthan, it's a nice place. Like I said in the beginning, they might, like Mr. Godrej, tell me, oh, come on, let me go and enjoy Jaisalmer sand dunes rather than you coming and talking to me about this, right? But if someone who was in Rajasthan, for instance, today in Rajasthan, if we have Cairns or if we have Vedanta in Rajasthan, when they tell people outside that, look, we are very happy being invested there, that carries more weight and credibility. So I do think that we need to take care of those who are inside. My big problem here is and this is something which you will recall I have said in the past also. And not just here, when I was finance secretary, when I went to FICCI or any of UCII, and this whole thing started off as to how to make the investment climate better. I always said to them that, all right, let's leave aside taxes for a minute. Is there anything else we can do? And then there was very little. So even in my conversations with people who are come to Rajasthan, who are already invested in Rajasthan, much of the issues that are related to taxation. That, you know, your taxes are very high, you should reduce this tax or reduce that tax. Now, taxation is a separate conversation. It has nothing to do with your being able to do business, because when you came in, the taxes were the same or almost the same. And more or less, their taxation across the board in India is the same. In some part, Rajasthan may be higher, but in others, Rajasthan may be lower. So it's not as if there is a very great difference between one state and the other. So if there are other issues, then certainly I can say that BIP does that. But as a test case, if there are 20 of those you would like to bring to me, I would be very happy to, kind of try and put them to the right people, so those issues are, kind of taken care of.
So
but taxation is an issue that I would suggest we keep out of this conversation.
So this is awesome. Leaving taxation apart, if we can institutionalize a platform where people who have invested in Rajasthan feel that they are welcomed, it would be great, but we'll certainly come back to you with the specifics. The second thing which PAFI has been talking about, and I have also talked to you over a conversation, is we all tom-toy the foreign direct investment, which is great. I think every country needs FDI for the economic regeneration, but we do not track or celebrate domestic investments. And that is something which we are very passionate about. Domestic investment does not mean Bombay Club or Indian companies. Domestic investment is people who are already in India when they invest. of course, FDI definition is there. We find that because there is no celebration of domestic investment, there is no recognition of what the domestic industry does in terms of domestic investments. So here is a suggestion for your consideration. If Rajasthan could consider year on year, and PAFI would be very willing to work with you, is to celebrate year on year what are the domestic investments in Rajasthan. You could be a trendsetter where we could request all the states to start looking at, because currently we don't feel that kind of warmth or welcome, or we feel a little neglected because FDI is recognized, but domestic investment is not.
So let me say this to you, Ajay. I think it's a perception, but it's not the reality. In fact, we don't treat FDI well in this country. If you look at FEMA, Foreign Exchange Management Act, it makes it near impossible for foreign entities to work in India. Look at the e-commerce companies which came into India. Every third day we come out with a new regulation to stifle them. We don't treat FDI very well. So I think let's disabuse ourselves of this notion that they are celebrated. I don't think they are. I think we are not recognizing enough the importance of FDI, not in terms of investment, because Ajay, I again believe investment per se means nothing. It's just capital that you invest or put in the ground. What is important is why FDI becomes important for India is for two reasons. One is our balance of trade. So Indian domestic industry has not done enough to export. And therefore, our current account deficit runs as high as 4 to 5% of the GDP, which is intolerably high. And that happens because we import more than we export. So what is happening is we are importing a shirt of 400 rupees from Bangladesh, but we can't produce a 400 rupee shirt of quality in India. So we need to also sit back and question ourselves. Why is it that we are in a situation of this nature, that our current account deficit now runs to 5%, 4%? It's intolerable. We are at this point of time, the sovereign credit rating is at the lowest. It is BBB minus negative. If you went one notch below that, you will become a junk grade economy. And the two reasons, one is, of course, galloping fiscal deficit, and the other is the current account deficit. So what does FDI do? FDI helps us bridge the balance of payment requirements. That foreign exchange which comes in as FDI goes to pay for your imports, which you import and you don't export. So that is paid for by that foreign exchange which comes in. That's the first one which FDI does here. The second part is that if our national savings rate are going to be at 30%, and our ambition is to make the country grow at 8.5%, 9%, if you want to grow at 9%, your gross investment rate has to be close to 36% of the GDP. With 30% savings rate, you are not going to go anywhere beyond 7%, however hard you may try, because we don't have capital. So the second thing it does is it brings in foreign savings to add to the domestic savings to increase our investment rate. So FDI is not simply because we like the color of the skin, it is because we like the color of that dollar which comes in with it. But I take your point, but I would like PAFI to do, and you can do this. It's not a question of somebody investing money. We need to put in a little more sophisticated index to show the real contribution of the Indian business community. Like I mentioned earlier, productivity. If you can show that the productivity in the textile industry is X, but in this particular industry, they are able to raise it from X plus 2, then that needs to be celebrated. If labor productivity goes up from X to X plus 2, that needs to be celebrated. if iCore is better than what it is in others in the same sector, then that has to be celebrated. So I think do a little bit of thinking on this and see how we can come up with an index of real winners who are really able to use both capital and labor efficiently, more efficiently than what we are using today, or new technological paradigm shift in the manner in which we use technology. I yesterday met with a person startup from Rajasthan, where there, of course, US IIT Mumbai guys, 2 boys went away to US and came back, and what they did it. They are now using ice as energy storage. So in place of battery, they are using ice, and they have technology that uses ice. You can do air conditioning, but you can also, it is also acts like an inverter. Now, this, of course, is a paradigm shift in the manner in which we are going to store energy in the future. I would certainly say these guys should be put right on top of that pedestal, and we should, kind of go to town celebrating something like this. But just saying simply that somebody has invested 50 crores or 100 crores, where the equity is 20 crores, 80 crores comes from debt. I don't think you would like to celebrate that. We would certainly like to facilitate it because it adds to the investment or the total wealth in the state, adds to employment. So I'm not decrying them, but obviously that cannot be the criteria for celebrating somebody in that sense. So come up with something. I would be really happy, in fact, that we can do that in Rajasthan. We can have a big celebration for people like that, those, which would be really worth the while.
So it's always when we talk to you, there's always some more homework to do, which is great. We'll come back to you on that. I know we are inching towards closure, but I have one question, which is from Siddharth Dasgupta from OYO. He's saying that they have worked in terms of tribal homestays projects in Gujarat, and they'll be happy to work on a similar homestay in Rajasthan. Should there be any interest? Who should he be in touch with? Where does he start on this aspect?
Write a mail to me, and then I will connect them with the right people. And I think we have a lot of interest in it. We would be very happy with this.
Excellent.
I would like to understand a little more how it works. But yes, on the answer to that is we are very interested. Please write to us.
So Siddharth, you've got your answer. I've got an anonymous attendee who's asking a general question, but I think you've already answered. For all the approvals of electricity, water, pollution, infrastructure, I think you should get in touch with BIP.
We also have a one-stop shop now in BIP for larger industry.
Okay.
So all the departmental persons sit under that one roof.
Excellent.
And they provide all the approvals there.
Great. So I think we've covered. There are some more questions, but we are inching towards 5 o'clock, and I'm mindful of your time. Over to you, Tanmoy. Unless Dr. Mayaram, you want to give any closing remarks? Yeah, thank you. Tanmoy, over to you.
Thank you, Ajay, and thank you, sir, for a very, very educative session for back to your roots. And it is payback time for your home state. You did a lot in your stints earlier for Rajasthan, and it is delightfully heartening to see that this is another opportunity where you are giving back to the state in terms of new investments, new industries, obviously leading to economic prosperity as well as employment for the state. So we learned a lot about the fresh way in which Rajasthan is looking at attracting investments. Specifically, I noted with specific interest some of the focus that you're making on green financing requirements as well as the climate mitigation initiatives that Rajasthan is taking, which is definitely something new that we are hearing and fresh that we are hearing from a state. It is definitely the need of the hour to look at industrialization and balancing that with climate change impact on state or on our country as we go forward. So that apart from that, I heard the very magical words of deemed approval, which coming from government is very, very nice to here, and I'm sure you are following up through action as well. So that's a very, very positive indicator for the fact that you do not need to keep endlessly waiting for approvals of certain categories of endorsements that you need from government to proceed as industry. So that's very, very good. I think you rightly analyzed earlier on in your statement about the fact that there needs to be more visibility of the state of Rajasthan to investors. I think you have made your state very visible to all classes of tourism. I think the Tourism Act of Rajasthan is a tremendous act that you have put in place. Not only that, as well as the fact that even ordinary citizens, when they interface with tourists, actually give you that welcoming interface. So you have actually percolated that DNA into the very fabric of the people of Rajasthan in every city of Rajasthan that I visited. So it's a tremendous transformation that has happened. And obviously there is so much of heritage, culture, and so many things to have people interested in visiting Rajasthan. The next natural step is for people to come and invest in industry in your state. And as you correctly analyzed, the western part of Rajasthan is so rich for large footprint of solar energy. And as we look at renewable sources more and more to replace the traditional sources of energy, clearly your state is presenting a very, very potent proposition. And as you are aware, sir, Tata Power is availing that in large measure in several parts of your state. I think you talked about the Rajasthan Facilitation Act, which is also extremely encouraging. That's another one which is where you are actually cutting down on the levels and the layers of approval processes, and coming out with a proactive way in which you want to help industry in setting up. And the other thing that I heard very, very positive from you is a 36-month moratorium on inspector visits to allow the industries to get their act together, and to give them the breathing space for them to put their compliance act together. I think that itself is also a very, very encouraging step. So overall, I think we also heard some recommendations from you to the federal government, where you talked about some recommendations of changes in the Electricity Act, which are extremely pertinent for things to really change in the energy landscape in the country. And I think those three suggestions that you made in changes of the Electricity Act, the Central Electricity Act, were extremely well thought through as well. So overall, I think you are creating an enabling environment for more and more industries of all categories, whether from food products to manufacturing, to look at your state. And I think the relevance of the physical presence of the Mumbai Delhi industrial corridor and having the largest amount of kilometers in the state of Rajasthan assumes special significance, because there is the opportunity for greenfield development on both sides of the corridor as we go along. So that's another clear value proposition that is coming or presenting itself to industry from the state of Rajasthan. So on behalf of PAFI, we want to thank you, and please pardon me if I have not played back anything inappropriate or wrong from what I heard from you. Please do pardon me, but I tried to capture some notes and tried to summarize what you stated to us, which was extremely useful and helpful for understanding the changed industrial climate and the industry-ready climate in the state of Rajasthan for future potential investors. Thank you all for participating in this webinar. And thank you, Dr. Mayaram, once again for your valuable time and all your inputs, which have definitely greatly benefited all the listeners and people who attended this program. I wish everybody a nice weekend, a happy weekend. Of course, I think with lesser rain in Delhi, because rains are creating some rivers in Delhi, as you would have seen the last 2 days. But wish everybody a safe weekend. Thank you so much for participating. Over to you, Shubho, for concluding the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mayaram. On behalf of PAFI, I would like to thank you again and add to what Tanmay mentioned. I think we should officially close the session now, and thank you again.